Can you hear the thunder of 10,000 hooves? Have you ever seen a city built from the fragments of a broken world? What remains when the sword finally meets the silk? The Timurid Empire was not a mere sequence of battles or a collection of dusty dates in a forgotten ledger. It was a blinding supernova of human ambition that illuminated the Silk Road with the twin flames of unparalleled cultural brilliance and absolute military terror. We often view history as a slow progression of tides, but here was a tidal wave that reshaped the very foundations of the earth from the Ganges to the gates of Europe. This was a realm where the stench of the battlefield and the fragrance of the rose garden existed in a hauntingly perfect symmetry. At its heart stood a figure of mythic proportions whose vision was as vast as the horizons he conquered with such ruthless efficiency. He did not just build an empire, he forged a new definition of what it meant to rule the soul of Asia. This story is the archive of a dream that was written in blood and finished in the most exquisite lapis lazuli. It is a testament to the heights of human genius and the terrifying depths of our capacity for destruction. As the 14th century began to wane, the vast territories of the former Mongol lords lay in a state of fractured chaos and endless tribal warfare. The old order was dying, and the wind of the steppe carried only the scent of decay and the cries of the leaderless. Out of this turbulence rose a man who would claim the mantle of the world shaker and restore the glory of the Khans under a new banner. He was a product of the rugged Transoxiana landscape where survival was a daily struggle and power was the only currency of any real value. The world at that time was a mosaic of rival sultanates and fading kingdoms, all waiting for a hand strong enough to bind them together. His rise was not an accident of birth, but a relentless climb through the fires of local skirmishes and political betrayals. He understood that the people did not just need a king, they needed a legend to follow into the unknown. The context of his era was one of shifting borders and spiritual longing, where the ancient ways of the nomad met the rising tide of Islamic civilization. It was in this crucible that the Timurid identity was born, a fusion of the sword and the scripture. The primary mechanism of this incredible expansion was a military doctrine based on absolute speed and the psychological paralysis of every opponent. Timur did not merely march, he swept across the geography like a force of nature that rendered traditional walls and fortifications utterly obsolete. His horsemen were trained to live in the saddle and strike with a precision that left the defenders of great cities breathless and broken. By utilizing a network of spies and a sophisticated logistics system, he could appear at the gates of an enemy before they even knew he had crossed their borders. This velocity of movement was coupled with a terrifying policy of calculated violence that served as a warning to any who dared to resist his will. He transformed the act of war into a grand theater of fear, where the sight of his banners was often enough to trigger a surrender. The mechanism was simple yet devastatingly effective because it combined the ancient nomadic fury with a modern understanding of psychological warfare. Every campaign was a masterclass in coordination where heavy cavalry and light archers worked in a lethal dance of death. This was the engine that drove the empire to the ends of the known world and beyond. The immediate effect of this crushing momentum was the accumulation of the greatest artistic and intellectual minds in the history of the East. As cities fell, their finest architects and poets and scientists were not slaughtered, but were instead sent back to the capital of Samarkand. This forced migration of genius created a cultural explosion that turned a desert outpost into the intellectual center of the universe. The blue domes of the Timurid mosques began to rise toward the heavens as a visual representation of a power that was both earthly and divine. Artists from Persia and India and China mingled in the courts to create a synthesis of styles that would define the aesthetic of the Islamic world for centuries. The effect was a renaissance that flourished under the shadow of the conqueror's blade, where science and beauty were given the space to breathe. Astronomers mapped the stars from massive observatories, while poets sang of the fleeting nature of time and the permanence of art. The wealth of 100 nations was poured into the creation of gardens that were meant to be earthly reflections of paradise. This was the great paradox of the era where the man who destroyed cities also became the greatest patron of the arts the world had ever seen. The ultimate result of this era was the birth of a legacy that would eventually find its most majestic expression in the Mughal Empire of India. The Timurid seed was planted in the fertile soil of the subcontinent and gave rise to wonders like the Taj Mahal and the Red Fort. The intellectual and administrative systems developed in Samarkand became the blueprint for the great gunpowder empires that would dominate the early modern period. Even as the central authority of the dynasty began to fade, the cultural light they ignited continued to burn in the hearts of their descendants. The result was a permanent shift in the center of gravity for the Islamic world, which moved toward the sophisticated urban centers of Central Asia. The fusion of Turkic and Persian traditions created a new identity that still resonates in the languages and the architecture of the region today. They proved that power could be more than just a conquest, and that a ruler's true monument is the beauty he leaves behind. The world was forever changed because a single lineage decided to reach for the stars while standing on a foundation of iron. Their history is the bridge between the medieval darkness and the dawn of the modern world. As we stand today before the ruins of their greatness, we are reminded that all empires are but whispers in the wind of time. The turquoise tiles may fade and the names of the generals may be forgotten, but the spirit of the Timurid age remains etched into the collective memory of humanity. It was a time of extremes where the most brutal realities of life were met with the most delicate aspirations of the soul. We see in their story a reflection of our own desire to build something that outlasts our own fragile existence. The balance they struck between the terror of the march and the peace of the library is a lesson for every generation that follows. Power is a flickering flame, but the pursuit of excellence is a fire that can never be truly extinguished. The archive of the past is open to those who have the courage to look into the eyes of the giants who once ruled the earth. We are the inheritors of their questions and the keepers of their stories. The golden road to Samarkand still beckons to those who seek the truth behind the legend of the sword. The shadows of the great conquerors continue to dance upon the walls of history and remind us of the weight of our own choices. Every empire eventually returns to the dust from which it rose, but the echoes of its achievements remain. We hope this journey through the halls of time has sparked a flame of curiosity in your own heart. Join us as we continue to explore the epic tales of the men and women who carved their names into the stone of eternity. Your support allows us to keep these forgotten memories alive for the world to see. The past is never truly gone as long as we speak its name.